Guys, do you have any questions regarding yesterday's session? Both of you, any questions? Okay, good. So, did you try that second one, second assignment?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, fine. Tulsi, did you start it? You also? I shared that you can go through it if you have any questions. So, the text path and all. Okay, XPath and encoding part. I will share that third assignment. So today I will share you. Okay. Today we'll discuss about exception strategy. So because it's an important concept. Once this is done, so we'll go for Salesforce connector, then scatter gather. So one by one we'll go ahead. Okay, na? So this is an important concept. So that's what we'll discuss. First we have to, once your application is done, so we have to implement this exception strategy. So each and every application exception strategy should be there, because once you done the application, so sometimes might be your target system got failed, or else your whatever you are giving, you are getting JSON input, right? Some issues are there. So in the JSON input, some parsing issues are there. So the type of issues we should be handled actually. So we are always giving proper error code and proper error message to the client, whoever trying to consume our services, because we are exposing the services. Sometimes we are consuming the services, right? So whenever you are consuming or else you are exposing, so we should give proper error message whenever anything happened. We should give proper error code and error message actually. We should never give 500 kind of thing actually. It should always go 100 and then 200. So it's if it is a 200 is a success, 400 plus 400, 401, 40 up to 404. So it's a client side mistake, right? If it is a 500, generally it's a server side mistake, that is target system. If target system is down, so we'll get that 500. Even though that time also we have to give proper error message, like timeout kind of thing, we have to give proper error message to the client. Okay, so that error message based on the target system, based on the mistake in our code, so we have to catch that type of exceptions. So in the error handling part, so then you have to frame proper error message. So why? Because so sometimes client sometimes client side is nothing but a user, right? So you have to think user perspective. So you have to give proper meaningful message actually. Suppose I am getting null pointer exception in the flow, right? If you give null pointer exception to the user, so you can't able to understand, right? So we have to give proper error message to the user. So boss, this some mistake happened, because of this we are getting this. So the type of meaningful message we have to give to the user. Okay. So how we'll do this type of things in the exception strategy? So it's a similar implementation of like Java only here also. So here so many exception strategies are there. So before going to exception strategy, so these are two terminologies. So one is error, another one is exception. So what is meant by an error, and then what is meant by an exception? So coming to error and exception differences. So first one is an error, next one is an exception. So any idea? Can you tell me what is the difference between error and exception? Whatever the technology you are working on, so whatever the technology, the .NET, so everywhere same, right? Error and exception. So everybody should implement these type of things. So what was the difference?
So something but as an like we'll get by just like 400 405. This is a type of error. So exception I think null pointer exception and value not found. So this type of exception will be finding.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. So error is nothing but, so if we get an error, so we should resolve it until unless we can't go ahead to next level, right? So but whereas an exception, if we get it, no need to handle it actually, no need to resolve that one. So we can handle it, we can go ahead next level. There is no showstopper actually. But whereas if we get an error, so we should resolve it the next time only, until unless we can't able to build the code also, right? So that is a main difference actually. We have different types of errors like network errors, right? Suppose you are implemented one code, so sometimes you will see JVM memory issues, right? Memory becomes used more actually. That time heap space issues will get, right? Memory full kind of thing. So the type of network issues. So coming to technical issues. Technical means your code have some issues like syntax errors. Suppose you have to write some mail expression, so but that is not proper way, right? Or else if you are writing some SOP in the Java code, so that is system.out.println. So is there any mistake in the I mean syntactically? So then that time, so we should resolve that actually. Otherwise we can't able to go ahead uh, with compilation, right? So the compilation will error will get actually while compiling the JVM, while compiling the Java, right? So that time will get compilation error. Another one is network error actually. Network error means like this type of errors. So JVM heap space issues. So the type of errors will get it actually. So that is about error actually. But whereas an exception, if we get the exception also, we'll go ahead. How will go ahead? So that is nothing but we have to handle it. So that is exception handling, will do it. So how many types of exception? Even exception also, so it will come in the compilation, and some of the exception will come in the runtime actually. So these are two types of exceptions. First one is compile time. So that is nothing but a what we call a compilation exception. You can say compilation exception. Another one is a runtime exception. Compilation and then runtime exception. So compilation exception means while compiling time also will get some exception. So and then runtime. So in the runtime we'll get some exception actually. Compilation exception means, so while compiling the code we'll get some exception. Whereas in runtime, so while running the JVM, right, that time we'll get some exception actually. Like file not found exception. So we are trying to read the data from the file, right? So but in that particular path that file is not there. So that is nothing but a runtime exception actually. So here some null pointer exception, something like string index out of bound exception, and then these are all coming under compilation exception only. Coming to runtime exception, like logical mistakes actually. Logical mistake means anything by zero. Suppose we are doing some calculation, anything by zero, right? So it won't give any compilation issue, right? Anything by zero. We are trying to calculate some data, so then we are giving some 100 by zero. So this is giving arithmetic exception, right? So it won't give any compilation error, but in runtime you will get some exception that is nothing but an arithmetic exception, right? This type of issues actually. So if we get runtime exception, we no need to, I mean we won't get any issue. So will handle using try catch black, so or else there is a different ways we can handle it. If we handle it, so we can go ahead next level actually. So exact difference is, if we get an error, suppose there is a 10 lines of code in the your 10 lines of code in your whatever you return. So but in the fifth line we are getting error. Fifth line we are getting an error. Suppose in case of error I am talking about, in case of fifth line, fifth statement, you are getting an error, right? So that time we can't able to go ahead with sixth statement, right? Sixth statement, seventh statement, it won't execute it actually. It won't execute in case of error. If you get an error, so in your code 10 lines of 10 lines there, if you get fifth line an error, so sixth line, seventh line, it won't execute it actually. Remaining part of the code it won't execute. But whereas in exception handling, exception, if we get the error in fifth line also, means exception in fifth line also, so if we handle it, so remaining lines all it will execute it actually. There is no showstopper if we handle it. So that is the main difference between error and exception. So any questions?
Now I can.
Guys, clear, right? Error and exception differences. Okay, so coming to here, in case of Java, so how we'll handle it? So there is a two ways we can handle the exceptions. So one way is there is a throw keyword actually, THROW throw keyword. That is one way to handle it. Another way is, so there is a concept called try, catch. This is a syntax actually, try. Next one is whatever the exception you are getting, so we have to catch that exception. CATCH, catch. Then finally this is the way to handle the exception in Java generally. Throw is one of the keyword. So if you use throw keyword, whatever the exception you are getting, just throw them out. No need to handle it. But whereas another way is, whatever you are getting that exception, right, we have to keep it under try black. That whole code we have to keep it under try black. So whenever whenever exception happen in the try black, that is that will cache by your cache black actually. In the cache black we have to give some proper error message exception some here. The exception will be catch. Okay, so then here if you want to display it, we can use there is a print stack trace. Don't confuse it, just I'm trying to understanding purpose only, I'm trying to explain in Java. If you're not aware, no issue. Okay, print stack trace. In the print stack trace we just displayed that exception, whatever the exception you are getting, we'll just display it. Or else if you want to give a proper error message to the user, so then we'll share that error message also. We'll customize that error message, then exception will send back to the client. So then finally black, in the finally black what we'll do, whatever the database connections or the file input stream will open, right, all the closing statements we have to keep it under finally black. So here coming back again, so there are two ways to handle the exceptions. If you get it, either it's a compilation exception or else a runtime exception, so we have to handle like this. So one way is we have to use there is a keyword called throw keyword. Using the throws actually, so using the throws we just throw them out, so no need to handle it. So second one is, so try catch black. If you use try catch black and the try black, so we have to keep it whole code, whatever the code you implemented, so that whole code you have to keep it, or else wherever the piece of the code we suspect to getting an exception. Suppose there is a statement enter some x equal, so 100/0. So this is the cause to get the exception, right? Arithmetic exception. Yeah, yeah, arithmetic exception. So this line only if you suspect wherever the exception is getting, that statement we have to keep it in the try black, or else if you don't know where we'll get the exception, we can keep it all the code in the try black. So once the exception caught it, right, exception raised it, right, so that will go on cache into the cache block. Okay, if you want to display it, you can display it. If you want to customize it, you can customize it. So then whatever the other statements, right, so once you handle it, so whatever the remaining statements, happily it will execute it. Actually there is no showstopper, it will execute it. So then finally, so whatever the connections open, or else what are the file input stream, this type of open streams, if you use it, if you close that, it's recommended to close this all the things in the final blank. So these things happen in the Java actually. So coming to our MuleSoft, how we'll handle it. So what are the exception strategies we have? You guys are clear, right? Same way you have to implement in the exception in the MuleSoft also. So what happened here, when you raise an exception, when you get an exception, you have to keep it in catch flag, then you have to catch it, right? So here also same thing. So we have so many exception strategies are there. Okay, so these are the exception strategies in the MuleSoft. Now you are clear, right? What is meant by exception, what is meant by error. So what we'll do if we get an exception, right? So generally, if a code should be robust, then we have to handle properly this error handling kind of thing also, because sometimes what happens, we are not sure if a code breaks. So even if code break also, you have to give proper error message, or else your target system is down, or else whatever you are getting input, that is not proper way. So all these things we have to consider. So we'll raise an exception. That exception we have to catch in the cache block. From the cache block we have to create a proper error message to the user. That error message we have to send back to the client. So that time client can able to understand based on the whatever you are sending an error message. He can able to understand and he can able to rectify that. Right, next time you won't repeat it. So these things happen. So coming to here, so in the palette we have different types of exceptions. So there is the catch exception, then choice exception, custom exception strategy, then exception mapping exception. Like this we have so many exception strategies here. So here coming to again Java, here we have so many exceptions, right? Arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, NP null point exception, and then string index out of bounds exception. Like that we have built-in exceptions, and then we can able to create our own exceptions also. So that is nothing but a user defined exception, right? So whatever the exception we have, that is either it's a built-in exception or else we can create our own exception, right? So these are all under exception. Actually exception is the super class for all the exceptions, right? Whatever the exception is, say arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, string index out of bound exception. So either you can create your custom exception. So custom exception means suppose you are writing a logic. If the user age is greater than 18, he is eligible for voting. If less than 18, he is not eligible for voting. So that time I want to give proper error message to the user. So boss, you are not eligible for voting if the age is less than 18. So further, there is no exception, right? There is no built-in exception for that. I want to create proper error message to the user. So that time you can able to create it. Actually you can able to create your custom exception. So that custom exception you have to catch it. In the cache block we have to give proper error message. Boss, your age is less than 18, so you are not eligible for the voting. This type of exception is not there in the built-in exception, right? So that is nothing but a custom exception. Our own exception also you can create. So using this exception handling. Okay. So that time we have to take exception superclass. Actually exception is a superclass for all the exception, right? So we have to consider that superclass exception. We have to raise our custom exception. So here also same way actually. So here exception, then so many multiple exceptions are there. Catch exception strategy, choice exception strategy, custom exception strategy. We can create our own exception strategy, like mapping exception strategy, reference exception strategy, rollback exception strategy. So one by one we'll see. So coming to catch exception strategy. So when you will go for catch exception strategy, you are getting an exception. You are getting an exception. So further, see one except one. I mean, in the flow, we are not sure which type of exception we'll get it. Might be we will get multiple exceptions, right? One is arithmetic exception, we'll get it. Another one is something else, array index out of bound exception, will get it. Like this, so many exception will get it. Null point exception will get it. So that's why we are not sure. In the catch block, we have to check the condition. So when we will get that exception, in the catch block, we'll check the expression. If that matches, that will come to the catch block, right? So here what I'm saying here, so in my case, so suppose here I mention like anything by 0, right? In case generally we'll get arithmetic exception, right? Anything by 0 it will give arithmetic exception, right? So I have one more exception. So nothing but my int array. So my array size is something like 10, right? So but I'm trying to insert array of 15th element equal to some 100. I must say you're getting right. My array size is 10, right? 10 means array starts from the 0, right? So 0 to 9, so means 10 elements. So but you are trying to insert 15th element. 15th element means that is nothing but 0 to 14. 14th element you are trying to insert it, right? So that time what happened, so we'll get array index out of bound exception. So in the single flow you are getting arithmetic exception as well as array index out of bound exception. Similarly string index out of bound exception, and then file not found exception, right? File not found exception, FNE. So suppose when you will get file not found exception, so you are trying to read something but there is no file in that, right? That time we'll get file not found exception. Another one is arithmetic exception, null point exception. So when you will get null point exception, so you are doing some operation on null. Suppose your string is string some s equal, that is nothing but empty string or else null. Okay, so but you are trying to calculate s dot length, scn s dot length. So this will give null pointer, because so there is no string value in the s, but you are trying to find out the length of that, right? So that time will give null pointer exception. Like that we will get different types of exception. So coming to here, catch exception strategy. So here we have to find out which exception it is, right? So we have to check the expression. If this satisfies, then it will go to this. If this condition will satisfy, it will go to this exception. Like that we have to drag that catch exception strategy. In the catch exception strategy, we have to check the expression. Okay, so if the expression satisfies, then that will go under that particular catch block. You are getting right? So we can drag multiple catch blocks based on your requirement. So each and every catch block we have to check the expression. If that expression is satisfied, it will go under that particular catch block. Is it clear? Guys, hello?
Yes, still get.
Yeah.
I'm clear.
Good. So again, what I'm saying here, suppose here, this total code we are keeping under try black according to Java. So we are keeping under try black. Suppose in this case we are getting arithmetic exception. In this case we are getting some array index out of bound exception. Again file not found exception, something like null point exception, right? So every try block followed by catch block. It should follow by catch block. In this catch block, in this catch flag, see here, one try flag followed by multiple catch flags. Why? Because here there is a chance to get multiple exceptions, right? So that's why, so we can write multiple catch flags. If it is a single try flag also, we can write multiple catch flags. So similarly here also, similarly our MuleSoft also, you can write multiple catch flags. So if each and every catch flag, we have to check the expression. So if that expression is satisfied, so that will go under that particular exception strategy. So means, suppose here I handle array index out of bound exception. Okay, array index out of bounds exception I handled in the catch flag. So that time what happened, whenever we get array index out of bound exception, so that will check it where you handle it, where you handle that exception. So it will identify, then it will go that particular strategy, particular exception. You are getting right? Suppose we are getting here arithmetic exception. So where you handle that arithmetic exception? So wherever you handle that arithmetic exception, it will look into it, it will go there actually. So here it will go. So suppose you are not writing arithmetic exception, you never handle that arithmetic exception. What happened? If you handle anywhere like this exception, so then it will go there, because arithmetic exception, array index out of bound exception, all are the subclasses of exception. So that's why if you not handle particular specific exception, then it will go superclass exception. You are getting right? If you handle superclass, then it will go and jump here. Then accordingly you have to handle. So here also same thing actually. So you can write multiple catch flags. So whenever you will get that issue in the flow, so if you handle that catch flag, it will go there. Otherwise, whatever the super level, right, that will go to the super level. If you not handle, you are getting in the flow, middle of the flow, you are getting some null pointer, right? So but you didn't handle null pointer properly. So where it will go? So wherever the superclass you handle, right? So that will go there actually. That will go there accordingly. Whatever you implemented that in the catch block, that part will execute it. You are getting.
So instead of multiple catch blocks, can we use comma separated? I mean, like example, we know we have a three expressions, like no one is null pointer and array out of bound, file not bound. So when can we use only by using one catch expression by using comma separator?
Yeah, that expression you have to handle actually. In the expression, either AE or index or compound exception, or else or null pointer exception. The condition you have to write accordingly. You are getting right.
Yes.
You see, we
Right
have
now,
in the print stack
my
trace.
question is like,
Yeah, tell.
my question is like basically, so I have a flow. In my flow, so I got I got three exceptions, like it's
Hmm.
array out of bound exception and
Hmm.
file not pointer, null pointer.
Hmm.
So can I use only one catch block by using comma separator? Like uh, I use this comma, so whenever what type of exception we go, it will be coming to one catch, like array open up comma separator. Can I use in that way, or I use three catch blocks?
It's recommended is three actually, three exception strategy you have to handle properly. But coming to your question, so you can write it actually in the expression, um, right here, execute when. So here we have to keep it that proper error message. 1 second, I will show you the syntax. See this. So now we are talking about this, right? Suppose in this case I am getting a SQL exception, right? So I am giving proper expression actually, exception dot caused by java dot sql exception. So when you will get this one, generally if you are doing some wrong credentials, you are trying to connect database, you are getting SQL exception, right? So coming to your question, so you can keep it R here, you can keep it R, either SQL exception or or some other exception or whatever. So the three conditions we have to check it. If the three conditions anyone is fine, because it's a or, right, anyone is fine, then it will jump to that particular cache block. You're getting?
Yes, I
Suppose
got it.
suppose I'm getting I'm trying to hit a target system, right? I'm getting one is timeout exception. I'm getting timeout error. Similarly, concurrent timeout. Sometimes two types of exception will get it actually. Timeout exception, concurrent timeout exception, or else lang exception. So this type of java.lang.exception. We're getting three exceptions, but three exceptions all are related to one concept, right? Means one concept means that is all are talking about your timeout error. You are getting concurrent timeout exception, or else java.lang.exception. All are related to one issue, right? That time you can go ahead and we can handle in a single cache block. You can get all these things, right? So either timeout exception, or else or concurrent timeout, or java.lang.exception. Three are related to one issue, then you can handle it. But here you are getting SQL exception, and then another one is you are getting something like null pointer exception. It is not recommended to write in a single. Why? Because after that, once you catch that exception, so here we need to manipulate the payload, right? What type of exception you have to give to the user, what type of error message you have to give it to the user, right? If you see here what I mentioned here, I just somewhat hard coded it actually. SQL exception, whatever the exception I am getting, exception.cause.message, I'm giving back to the user. Suppose in this case, think like this: you handle single cache block, a null pointer, as well as SQL exception. Somewhere here we just hard coded it here. SQL exception followed by some exception. Think like this: we are getting a null pointer exception. So this is cause is displaying null pointer exception, but you are displaying SQL exception equal to some null pointer exception. You are writing something like this, right? We are getting something like. So this is not make sense, right? So that's why whatever you are getting some exception, so you can write multiple cache flags. You can handle accordingly. You are getting that. It's a different type
Yes,
of
sir.
exception. If you are getting similar exception like timeout exception, concurrent timeout exception, java.lang.exception, these are all are related to same issue, then we can handle it actually. Sometimes, in my mission or else in server, you are getting concurrent exception. In your development time, you are getting timeout exception, because you are trying to hit from development mode to some target system that is in production or somewhere else. It is trying to connect it from your local, but from your local you don't have rights to connect to the target system. So that time will get timeout exception. It's keep on trying, but it's got failed. But in case of the server, right, server to server, might be exception name got changed actually. So that time you can keep it, or then you can keep it handle same, because all are similar to same issue, right? But whereas a null pointer is different, then SQL exception is different. So that's why you have to handle separately. Is it clear?
Okay, got it.
So next one is, so next one is the choice exception strategy. So what is meant by choice exception strategy? So here each and every flow should have only one choice exception strategy, each and every flow. So because here under choice exception strategy, so coming back to here, I have to explain this first. So there is error handling in each and every flow here. I told about private flow and public flow, and then what, main flow, right? Each and every main flow have error handling part, right? Similarly, private flow also have error handling, but your subflow, right? Your calling flow, wherever you are writing subflow, so then subflow have don't have own error handling strategy. So, but where it will handle, wherever you're calling that, right, main flow, so that in that location we have to handle it actually. So while saying the difference also, that time I was saying actually same term. So there is no specific error handling for subflows, but so wherever you calling that main flow, so that we have to handle there itself. Okay, now, so in case of provide flow, we have a error handling strategy. Okay, so here what I'm saying, if you observe here, there is a choice exception strategy. One choice exception strategy, we have a multiple catch flag. This is one catch flag, this is one catch flag, this is one catch flag. You're getting? So each and every flow have only one exception strategy, sorry, one choice exception strategy. Under that we have a multiple catch exception strategies. Clear, right? So next one is custom exception strategy. When we'll go for custom exception strategy, so whenever you want to create your custom exception, right? Your custom exception means user defined exception.
Is greater than something.
Yes, that time there is no built-in exception, right? If you see here, arithmetic, null pointer, string index, out of bounds is exception, file not found exception. So these are all what SQL exception. These are all what built-in exception. These are all under exception class, right? Exception is a super class for all the exception. That is a user defined, predefined exceptions. But so I want to create my own custom exception strategy based on the requirement. So that time we'll go for custom exception strategy. So we'll see one custom exception strategy example also. So next one is exception mapping. Next one is mapping exception strategy. So next one is reference exception strategy. So this is a reference exception strategy means, so if you see here, I'm writing directly here the exception strategy concept actually, but generally people how will prefer people write to exception handling part. So generally here this is a flow. Under that flow you are keeping all the exception strategies, right? All the exceptions, one by one exception keep on writing, right? But it's not recommended way to write it actually. So we have to drag role mapping exception strategy. You have to there is a mapping exception strategy, right? Generally how people will write, first we have to drag choice exception strategy in the bottom, means that global exception strategy you have to keep it actually. What happened, this code stuck. So they will create one global exception strategy, okay, outside of the flow. So this is inside of the flow. If you see here, it's got stuck. Okay, here see this, oh choice about it. See here, this is the choice exception strategy. In the choice exception strategy we can write multiple catch flags here. What I'm trying to say here, you are going to write outside of this flow, right? You are going to outside, or else you can create one more configuration file, you can write their exception part separately in our project, right? We can create one more configuration file, .xml file. You can write outside of your flow, right? So how will map that your exception strategy and then your flow using mapping exception strategy. You're getting, right? Mapping exception strategy. What I'm trying to say here, so here in this particular case, I'm writing under this flow itself. But how people generally will write, they will drag and drop mapping exception strategy here. So they will write outside of that flow, they will write global exception strategy. Whenever we'll get error, it will come here, right? You will drag and drop mapping exception strategy. In the mapping exception strategy, you will refer global exception strategy. That time what happened, whenever you get exception, it will go under mapping exception strategy. From the mapping exception strategy, we mention global exception strategy, then it will jump here, so then it will execute it. You are getting right? So just for mapping purpose, we will use mapping exception strategy. You guys clear, right?
Yes, somewhat
Getting confused?
confusing the mapping actually.
Nothing confusing, man. See here,
Yes.
I'm just redirecting actually. What I'm trying to say, if I drag it, it will get corrupt, I guess.
No, I got you, but in the
Yeah.
global exceptions actually. So all the exceptions you're writing in global, so
Yes.
that will be referencing actually. Am I right?
Yeah. Whenever that mapping, we have to drag under error handling part. When you get an exception, that will come under error handling part. So in the mapping exception strategy, nothing will mention. Just global exception strategy name will refer it. So that time what happen? It
Okay,
will
okay.
come to the mapping. Then from the mapping, it will jump to the global exception strategy. Means choice exception
Okay, okay.
strategy. So then it will execute
Fine.
each and every cache block based on the expression checking. You're getting that? Just for referring
Yes.
purpose, mapping purpose, we have to mention mapping exception strategy. For redirecting purpose, you can say.
Okay.
Okay, now.
Mhm.
Okay. So, I have one more session today onwards. So today demo is there. Okay, so we'll sign up today. So then we will continue same session tomorrow. Okay, now I will show you how to execute this, how to catch that exception, how to write the this thing, right? This expression, how we'll write it, where you will catch the exception from the print stack types. We have to catch this. You have to copy paste that. You have to keep it here. Whenever exception getting right, it will check here. So after validating expression, so how to write inside payload and all, I will show you. Okay, now I will take whatever we did yesterday, right? Database concept. Same database concept, I am handling this exception strategy. So whenever you are giving wrong credentials, right? Username and password wrong, right? Your schema name is wrong. That time it will redirect to your exception strategy. So that scenario only will implement exception strategy. Okay, now. Okay, thanks guys. Tomorrow we'll discuss this continuation part. Okay. Thanks guys. We'll meet tomorrow.